in the studios. Good morning, sir.
Good morning. How are you?
Great.
1-800-734-2132 is the talk line number. Of course, you can use all the regular radio station numbers, so if you're a regular listener and you know them, go ahead. But this is our 1-800-734-2132. That's the talk line number for the show. When you call in, you'll get on the air and get your legal question answered. So if you're joining us for the first time and you don't know what we do here, I'm an attorney in the mid-state, Carl Rominger, practice all over. And I've been doing this for a number of years here on the radio where people call in and get their legal questions answered. But we're live right now, so if you're sitting at home in the cold wondering what to do, because you're probably not going outside for a walk, I can tell you it said 0 on my thermometer. Google said 1. Somebody else posted -2 on their Facebook page. 4 is what you got. Yeah, so we've all got different temperatures, but I think we can agree on one thing. It's cold. There isn't much wind, though, so that's not so bad. But to get your legal questions answered, 1-800-734-2132, and that's our one-call number there. So it comes through the show, but if you call when the show's not on, it actually rings into my office and goes into our voicemail system during off hours and to the office staff during hours. So if you jot that number down, 1-800-734-2132, you can use it to call in today, or you can use it to call in any time. But if you have a question, here's your chance to get it answered for free. I'm also going to be giving out some Rillo's gift certificates to some random callers, so I'll let you know what you need to do if I pick you based on if I like the call. So if you want to get a free gift certificate for dinner at Rillo's here, you let me know. It's a good restaurant if you're not familiar with it. It's an Italian restaurant in Carlisle, very good place to eat. I like it there personally, and I happen to have a few gift cards that I can give out. So if you call in 1-800-734-2132 and you have a legal question, you might be one of the people randomly selected by my mind to get a gift card. Now, the Supreme Court's been pretty active this week, and not in the usual sense. A couple emergency stays have been signed by Sotomayor. One actually was signed granting a stay, and it has to do with Obamacare. The U.S. government asked the Supreme Court on Friday not to allow the Roman Catholic affiliated groups a temporary exemption from part of Obamacare health law that requires employers to provide insurance policies covering contraception. Judge Sotomayor stayed Obamacare as it applied to these Catholic groups, issued an injunction basically without even hearing from the government, then gave the government a chance to respond. What she'll do next, nobody knows. She can either decide it herself and keep an injunction in place while the litigation goes on below, or she can alternatively kick it up to all 9 justices to decide. But that is interesting because the grant of an actual stay by the Supreme Court on a justice on an emergency basis is fairly unusual. In the meantime, she also, because of the way the case assignment happens to be, she also got the Utah same-sex marriage issue in front of her, and there she ordered the government to respond, but did not stay the decision in the Utah courts and ultimately in the federal courts that have reviewed it to allow gay marriage in Utah. And it's a heavily Mormon state, and currently Mormons teach that homosexuality is a sin, and as a result, the state sort of wants, or at least a big portion of the people in the state want the judge's ruling overturned, but the Supreme Court has refused to stop or stay an ongoing series of marriages that are going to be happening there. So kind of interesting news in the Supreme Court realm. 1-800-734-2132 if you want to get in on the talk action here. If you have a legal question you want to get answered on the air, we'll be happy to do it. So feel free, 1-800-734-2132. Sometimes people say, well, what kind of questions can you answer on the air? Well, I can't go into a very elaborate, lengthy minutia, but I can pretty much answer any question you have, or if we don't know the answer, we'll usually promise to find it for you and get back to you. So 1-800-734-2132, but just to give you a few examples, quite often, and I'll think about this one today, there's going to be a lot of that black ice out there, and people will be slipping and sliding. So maybe we should talk a little bit about what the law of liability for landowners is, and we'll touch on that. If you wanted to call in and ask about a divorce or a custody question, or child support is big, how does child support calculated and how much will I have to pay? What can I do to keep my neighbor from parking on my property? All those good questions are ones we can answer. But let's talk about the snow and ice for a little bit here. When you slip or fall on snow or ice in Pennsylvania and you sue somebody for it, it sets up a controversy that involves landowner liability versus what we call comparative negligence or contributory negligence, where the person who slipped on the ice maybe shouldn't have slipped on the ice. And some people don't like the ideas of lawsuits where somebody simply sues because they fell, but the law doesn't like those either. If you just fall down and there's no negligence by the landowner, there's no liability. The question is, did the landowner do something wrong? And in Pennsylvania, the courts recognize that in the wintertime we have generally prevailing slippery conditions. That's the term they like to say. And as a result, if you fall on snow or ice just because it happens to be snowing or freezing rain or something, there's no liability. So you don't have to walk around in fear as the landowner that every person who slips and falls on ice on your property is going to have a lawsuit against you. But the time that the landlord or the property owner can become responsible is when there's an accumulation of ice and snow that they have not properly dealt with. And the law calls those hills and ridges of ice. And people sometimes say, what's a hill or ridge of ice? I think the best explanation is when you walk down the sidewalk and you get to that one business who didn't shovel, and there was 2 foot of snow and everybody tramped it down until it got all ridgy and you're slipping and sliding on it. And it's literally like little hills and ridges of ice. That's what the law is talking about. And so if there's a fresh snow or it's snowing all night, you don't have to keep everything perfectly clear. The other way is what we call the artificial condition. And I did one of these cases years ago involving a gas station where the guy got out of his car and slipped and fell, and he fell on black ice. And see, all the people who bring these claims are afraid to admit that they stepped on ice, so they always want to call it black ice. They say, oh, yeah, I slipped on this black ice. Well, black ice is not a hill or ridge of ice. It's a thin sheet, and there's no liability for black ice. So, again, if you fall on black ice or that thin coating of a parking lot, the hills and ridges doctrine is going to protect the landowner. But the one way around that, or the one way that helps the plaintiff, is something called the artificial condition. If the landowner has done something, if you want to get in on the conversation, you have any legal question at all, by the way, it's 1-800-734-2132. That's 1-800-734-2132. So feel free to jump on if you're awake and alive this morning. Probably still under the covers if I had to guess. If the landowner creates an artificial condition, and so the one that comes to mind is you know how over the gas pumps you have that apron that keeps the snow and ice off everything. Well, there was drainage for it, and the drainage came right out by the pump. And what happened is at night, or during the day, the snow up top would melt, and then it would trickle down through. And at some point in the evening, as the freezing temperatures came down, a piece of ice, black ice, formed there because the moisture accumulated in that spot right beside the pump. And my theory was, which was correct, I believe, that you created an artificial condition when you channeled the runoff water to freeze right by the pump where somebody would get out of their car. And my guy got out of his car, slipped on the black ice, hurt himself. Well, how did that happen? It happened because the landowner intentionally put the water where somebody's going to sit or step. And that's another one that we see sometimes when people plow the snow. And we saw one like this one time where there's a front door of a building and there's a drainage on the one side, and they plowed the snow to the other side. So all day long, as the snow melts, it runs in a stream across the front. It's cold at night, and you get this little rivulet of ice right across the front door. And that's an artificial condition, and that'll get you around hills and ridges. So even though you can't see that ice, that's that dangerous black ice. That's your exception. So if you're walking around out there, one of the other ones you run into, by the way, defenses is safer alternative path. The law also says that if you're standing in a parking lot and you could walk across a snowy way, or you could walk out and around and go right in a cleared way, that you sort of have a duty to navigate the cleared way. And these are just bars to bring in the cause of action. You can still be contributory negligent even if the landowner is negligent. So if I have allowed my parking lot to accumulate in hills and ridges of ice, and you see that and you walk on it and you didn't have to, you also could be negligent as well. And if a jury decides you're 50% or more negligent, you can't collect from me, even if I was negligent as the landowner. So when people walk in our office and tell us they have a slip and fall and it involves ice, I can tell you from a lawyer's standpoint, you're not getting very giddy and excited. It just doesn't get you a big return on your time usually. However, I do encourage people to look at their slip and fall cases very carefully, because over the years we've done quite well collecting on some where initially you wouldn't have thought so, but it turns out it has some value. Again, 1-800-734-2132, 1-800-734-2132. Be happy to answer your questions. Also in the news, by the way, kind of in lawyer news, but it also crosses into every central Pennsylvanian's favorite fear, illegal immigration. Sergio Garcia, a California lawyer, newly minted, was originally turned down by California State Bar for his law license because of the illegal status or undocumented status. But apparently he can now practice law in California, even though he is not a U.S. citizen and he's not technically legally in the country. And that's a very interesting turn of events. California Supreme Court ruled that no state law or public policy should stop him or others like him from obtaining a law license in the state. Immigration officials would be unlikely to pursue sanctions against an undocumented immigrant who has been living in the United States for years, had been educated in this country, and whose sole unlawful conduct was his presence in this country, the court said in a unanimous ruling. Under these circumstances, we conclude that the fact that an undocumented immigrant's presence in this country violates federal statutes is not itself sufficient or persuasive basis for denying undocumented immigrants as a class admission to the state bar, the court ruled. So there you go. You some states are giving driver's licenses, and now California is giving law licenses. Now, practically, as a libertarian, I don't really care what they do. But as a practicing attorney, we like to try to keep the shop closed. We don't need less more competition. If you read any of the John Grisham books, he always references the fact that there's too many lawyers, and it cuts into business having everybody standing around the courthouse hunting for the same cases. So, from a purely selfish business standpoint, I'm aghast at what has happened there. If you want to get on the conversation, it's 1-800-734-2132. I just want to remind you, Harrisburg Beer and Cigar over in Union Deposit Road in Harrisburg, one of my favorite cigar hangouts. They've got a beautiful lounge. They're getting ready to do a Super Bowl party. That's going to be pretty amazing. So if you get a chance, stop over there, Harrisburg Beer and Cigar off Union Deposit Road in Harrisburg, and tell them you're listening to Attorney Carl Rominger. Don't forget to follow me here on Spreaker.
98900.
The number to call Carl, 1-800-734-2132, 1-800-734-2132. Once again, live in the studio, here's Carl Rominger.
Hey, welcome back, 1-800-734-2132. I just got a post on Facebook, and they get a lot of legal questions there, but we put up an article. We have a page called The Carl Rominger Show, besides my personal page, where we post interesting legal things and all kinds of fun stuff. So you check up the Carl Rominger Show on Facebook, you may be able to jump on there. Architect facing 4 years in prison for designing multi-million-dollar mansion that killed firefighter. So the argument is the home designed by a German architect turned into a death trap when it caught fire in 2011. The idea being that the third-floor ceiling collapsed, killing a firefighter. And now the architect is being held legally responsible in the firefighter's death, allegedly. They're going to try him. And the question is, they're basically saying that he negligently installed a fireplace inside the home. And I don't think I follow all the details of it, but the interesting idea is he responsible or not responsible for that? There have been cases where people have been held criminally liable for creating dangerous situations. So, for instance, I believe in that club that burnt down, was it Rhode Island or years ago when the pyrotechnics set the ceiling on fire? When you have balcony collapses like we had in Philadelphia, other structural defects, people responsible for the repair quite often, or maintenance or design quite often, can get dragged in on theories. And the idea is you have to act with a reckless indifference to the value of human life, and you have to do so with a bad intent. I'm going to come back to that, but I have Jane on the line. Jane, my talk line number is 1-800-734-2132. What are you up to, Jane?
I was just wondering, what is the law or what is your advice on neighbors whose horses, ponies, and goats are continually on your property? They know you don't want them there, but what are you allowed to do to keep them off of there?
Well, I would say sell the horses for glue and eat the goats, right? But obviously you can't just take matters into your own hand per se. In fact, there was just a case in Dauphin County not too long ago where a guy was convicted for stealing sheep because it was undisputed that his neighbor's sheep kept escaping onto his property. So he one night rustled up all the sheep and sold them off at a farm auction. And he got himself in trouble for that because the proper thing to do, and let me explain, would be to file a nuisance lawsuit. And that's where you go to a judge and you say, Judge, I have neighbors and they have cows and pigs and horses and chickens, and a certain assortment of their animals keep wandering onto my property. And what the judges do is give an injunction. Now, we all know that's impossible, okay? It's impossible to guarantee that every animal is going to stay penned up all the time. But the judge can certainly enforce a general provision that they're responsible, and that if it persists, he can order them to remove the livestock from the property, basically interfere with their ability to farm or have a livelihood or recreation, some people would say. But the reality is, if their conduct or the condition of their property is such that you're repeatedly disturbed, so think about it the same way as you would a barking dog, okay? The law says you can enjoin a neighbor from keeping a barking dog. And I don't mean a dog that barks a little bit, but I mean a true nuisance dog. Well, if your neighbor's bull or horse is wandering around your land all the time, that is a potential nuisance and a danger. Do you have kids?
No.
Yeah. I mean, you don't have the argument that they're going to trample my 4-year-old. Yeah, and, you know, horses, I like horses, but they're also an animal that can be a little unpredictable, a little spooky, not exactly the kind of animal I want wandering around unchecked on my property. So, no, you have an absolute right to go to court on that. You do want to document it, though, because, you know, here's what's going to happen when you get to court. You're going to say they're there all the time, and they're going to say it only happened twice, right?
No, these are out all the time. I mean, they don't even attempt to keep them in anymore.
Now, here's the next question. Is there a reason why they're doing this? Have you figured out is there an underlying problem, like the farmer's just so old now he's not paying any attention anymore? Or have we just got somebody who doesn't know how to farm? Or what do we got going on here?
I think they just don't know how to farm.
Just don't know what they're doing.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, you know, and I used to work on farm when I was a kid, and you probably know this, you know, fences have to be mended on a very regular basis. And in fact, you know, the horses and the cows, and they're always pushing on them and leaning on them, and the poles, you know, the poles go bad and wires come down, and if you don't, it's a lot of work. And I guess maybe sometimes a lot of people don't want to keep up with it. But no, if you, for instance, came to see me in my office, I would first thing write a letter and give them a stern warning that if it happens again, a lawsuit's going to be filed. And then I would tell you to take your cell phone or video camera or whatever you use to take video these days. And the first time one comes trotting down the lane, take a picture or 3 of it, you know. And then we go right to court and ask the judge to order them to keep their animals penned in.
Okay.
All right?
All right, thank you.
Yeah, you don't have to take it. I mean, it's not if it's going on repeatedly. Like I say, if it was one time a horse, you know, busted the fence and was running around your field, the judge would probably say, well, stuff happens, you know. But here, if they're willfully not controlling the animals and you can show it, I'm pretty sure you can get an injunction. Also, if those animals are damaging your property, they do become fair game potentially. But in this day and age, I wouldn't recommend shooting somebody else's horse because that'll cause all kinds of commotion. If the goat, nobody would probably care about, but the horse, you'll have the SPCA and all those other people down here.
Yes.
All right.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Hey, enjoy the weather.
You too.
Bye bye. 1-800-734-2132 if you want to get in on the conversation. Again, that's 1-800-734-2132. Yeah, that's always a problem with landowners who have something that they do. I have a case that I worked on a little bit where the landowner next door had a teenage son, and the teenage son had a car, and the car had a big souped-up engine in it. And the teenage son's idea of fun was to go out and rev the engine up repeatedly, which I understand. As a teenage kid, he's got a car with a big engine, and he wants to show it off to his friends. But I don't mean just once or twice. I mean dozens of times. Late in the evening, he'd bring his friends over, and they'd get out there, and they'd work on the car, and then they'd zoom the engine up, and then they would do this or that. Well, there was no noise ordinance in the town, so we had to threaten a nuisance suit. And I guess when his dad figured out that he'd have to hire a lawyer to defend, that was enough to get the teenager some restrictions. And I don't think my clients cared about the middle of the day. It was those off hours. Jay, you're on WIOO. What's going on, my friend?
Hey, Carl, how you doing?
Good.
I wasn't sure you were on today. I'll tell you why. And I missed the beginning because I'm just curious. I turned on the radio at 1000 at AM, and I couldn't get it. A lot of static on both my radios, and eventually I went to the internet, and I see you're on 97.9 FM. Is that?
We're on 4 different stations. We're on 97. Look at the sign here. We're on 97.9 FM, 1000 AM, 93.9 FM, and 1480 AM. And I think the latter two are more Chambersburg, Shippensburg centric, and the first two are more Carlisle, Harrisburg centric. And according to the coverage map, and I know this. I know when the weather's good and the daylight's clear, I can get 1000 in downtown Harrisburg.
Right. I'm in Susquehanna Township. So
yeah.
I normally can, and today on any of the radios I couldn't, and I got onto Facebook and
Gotcha.
Checked it out, got on the internet, but I just was kind of curious.
Yeah, well, that's the other thing. We have the live feed, and as you know, of course, I podcast everything. The other thing is, maybe the cyclone of cold air coming down from the board operator's like, tell him to try it again.
Try his AM 1000 again.
He wants to make sure you're getting it.
Well, I will after.
He's like, I'm an engineer, darn it, and I want to know. No, and I think, anyhow, I just like to joke about that, but they were describing it as a cyclone of cold air descending from the Arctic or something like this.
I thought it was a bad omen for the Eagles game.
Now, did you see, which reminds me, by the way, I posted this on Facebook because somebody posted it to my page, and I reshared it because it made me laugh. The Philadelphia police have announced that they are going to be going undercover as Saints fans.
Yes.
And,
I saw that.
And, I've talked with people, and it's funny because everybody has a story. Everybody has a story about some guy who wore the opposite team's jersey to a Phillies game or a Eagles game or even who's the baseball team? Yeah, Phillies and the Philly. Anyhow, somebody has worn the wrong jersey to a Philadelphia sporting event and been at least accosted, if not spat on, hit, slapped, kicked, or punched in the parking garage. And
they're going on in California now too.
So I like this theory. The guy who's yelling "Go Saints" with his face painted. When you go to beat him up, you'll discover it's aggravated assault on a police officer.
Supposedly they're not going to wear Saints paraphernalia, and they're going to be clearly marked. I don't know if they're going to have badges or what they're going to do, but they were going to. I forget what group. Some group was going to run up the steps of the art museum in Saints gear. I guess a bunch of Saints fans or some group coming, and that was suggested they not do that. And apparently, some Eagles fans were collecting doorknobs to throw at them or something like that.
Well, you can actually get beat up in Philadelphia for suggesting to those people that Rocky was not real and that he didn't really win a boxing title. So, they're very sensitive.
Well, years ago, we're talking 30-some years ago. In fact, it was January, and they were playing the Cowboys for the NFC Championship, and I had 4 tickets. I was a season ticket holder, way up at the top of Veterans Stadium. And actually had 3 guys from this area, my boss, and a couple guys, come on down. And one of them was a Cowboys fan.
Mm-hmm.
And he tended, when he had a few, he tended to be very loud about it and pugnacious. And I suggested, Doug, you're outnumbered here, and you're way up there in the 700th level. I just kind of keep it to yourself and keep, quiet. And since the Eagles won, of course, it was a jolly old time for everyone but Doug. But he did have the sense not to try to.
Right, because if you're too close...
And the thing is, of course, the Eagles fans are one thing, and Philly has a reputation, but look at what's been happening out in the West Coast in L.A. and San Francisco. I think that's just a sign of we're less civil and we're less able to deal with. I mean, you just got more violence because people.
Isn't it weird? Isn't it
weird
weird that the fans are getting more violent, and in the meantime, the NFL and everybody's working hard on how to make the game less physically violent?
Well, so I mean, that's what I think our problem. We say, well, we have people, we have situations where crazies have guns. I mean, you know what I'm talking about, the shootings and everything. And I just think that's because people nowadays are brought up and they don't know how to handle adversity. I mean, it's just, that's the way you handle it.
Right. Well, if you
talk, you shoot. So, I'm a Second Amendment proponent, although I'm not a gun person. But it's just the way. And in fact, I would think you'd see some of that in court. I'm guessing that people tend to explode.
Well, let me give you an interesting observation of a couple judges, which is it hasn't happened a lot lately, but for a little while there, people started trying to raise their hands in court and talk. And when I say that, I mean people who weren't participating at the moment. And it's a Judge Judy phenomenon because she would allow sometimes a party or a spectator to be called on.
Yeah.
and so the TV version of court was in danger of taking over real court etiquette. And it was just kind of interesting because a couple of judges I knew had observed that they're like, why are people raising their hands? And then somebody figured it out that they were getting it from Judge Judy, so that you got to make sure people know that's not the decorum. But they didn't know any better because the only courtroom they've ever been in is the one that's on their TV.
And I have a friend who moved from here to the New York area, I guess. She's a school teacher, and she's trying to get out of jury duty. Apparently, she put something on Facebook and suggestions on how to get out of jury duty, and they're giving her all sorts of suggestions. And I've asked the question, I haven't had an answer, why do you want to get out of it? Now, she's a teacher, and I know, they don't want to miss that much work. I was on a jury many years ago, a murder trial, and although it was, there were things about it I didn't like because you're judging somebody in a capital crime, and that's not easy to do. It's not easy to decide to send somebody off to, I think, to death, possible death, or let them go if they're guilty. But I found it fascinating. I would welcome serving on a jury, even when I was working. I didn't quite end. I'm still waiting for an answer. Why don't you want to serve on a jury? Yeah,
and I don't know why. I think some people just don't want to be bothered and pulled out of their routine. And maybe if they did it, they'd realize it was more fun or interesting than they thought it would be. On the other hand, I get people all the time who stop me and go, how do I get on a jury? Because, I've lived in this county for 50 years, and I have never been called for jury duty, and my husband's been called 8 times over the years. And I'm like, well, that's like the slot machine at the casino. It's random, and it's some people are going to get more jackpots than others, I guess. And some people are going to get none, no matter how long they play. So, but I'm always suspicious of people who really want to be badly on a jury too, because I'm kind of like that's my theory, the same as you, which is who really wants to sit in judgment, and that goes back.
Well, I welcome the fact that we have that system, and
No, you're right. It's an important opportunity to exercise the constitutional protections and rights that we have. In fact, and let me just change tacks on you at all. I don't know if you've been following this at all, but Obama appointed some people to the National Labor Relations Board while Congress was in a form of a recess. And have you seen this challenge at all or followed it?
No.
Okay, so let me give you the setup, Jay. Obama says the Senate's not in session, so he appoints some people to the National Labor Relations Board. And a company who's not happy with the result, imagine that, because the company took the short stick in the hearing and their allegation would be that Obama packed it with his appointees who weren't approved by the Senate. And they've said, well, the Constitution requires that he get the advice and consent of the Senate, and that the president can only do a recess appointment when the Senate's not in session. And Obama's lawyers have said, well, The Senate was not in session, according to the president, although the Senate itself says it was in session. Okay, it had just taken not an actual recess, but some time off or something like this. And so it raises like a couple interesting constitutional questions because, first of all, who decides when the Senate's in session or not? Can the president decide that, or does the Senate itself decide when it's in session? And allowing the president to decide if they're in session or not would allow the president anytime he wants to say he doesn't have to enforce some legislation because he doesn't believe the Senate was really in session when it was passed, for instance, would be a problem. And then the other side about it is does the clause really allow him to, when it's not a true recess, but they're just not available at the moment, appoint somebody without advice or consent of the Senate? And so it's setting up to be very interesting because what shocked everybody was these challenges have been made routinely over the years because the last 4, 5, 7 presidents have been doing these recess appointments, and it's gotten more and more recently. By the way, which I'm going to tie this back into what you started with, and it's gotten more and more recently. Well, the appeals court surprised the heck out of everybody by saying, yeah, this clearly violates the Constitution because nobody saw it coming because the courts have never recognized the plain language of the Constitution on that point in recent years. But why is it happening more and more? And then one of the answers is because the discourse in government has gotten as poor as the discourse at the football games, where the Senate intentionally blocks the president's appointees for no other reason than one senator wants to hold them up, or 2 or 3 people just don't like a certain nomination. And so presidents Bush, Clinton, Bush, Obama, Reagan have all gotten frustrated and made recess appointments during what might not really be recesses. Isn't that interesting?
Well, certainly since, and I don't necessarily blame Reagan, but since the Reagan years, and I tend to think, after 40 years of television and grandstanding in front of the cameras and everything else, this has happened, and we're just so contentious now and there's very little integrity. I mean, can you imagine anybody like George Washington who essentially refused a kingship, refused a third term, had no desire for that kind of power?
That goes right back to what I was saying a minute ago. People want to serve on juries because they want to exercise power. It makes me suspicious. And, Socrates said that the person you need is the philosopher king, and he has to have the true philosopher king since he's only interested in the pursuit of justice and the higher mental arts. He wants nothing to do with leading, so you have to chain him down and ask him to make decisions and force him to do it. And probably George Washington was that guy, right? He literally was the Socratic philosopher king. He took the mantle.
He certainly didn't want to be,
Yeah, I mean, he took the mantle. He took the mantle because they felt they had to at the time. Remember? See, let's talk about that. How did the Patriots first come to be? Well, there's always power-hungry people, but this was a group of men. I can't say men and women, right? Maybe I'll throw Molly Pitcher in there or something. But this was a group of men who looked at what was going on and said it's wrong, and we want to establish a new higher ideal or form of government. And I think they felt it as a calling. And that's probably the difference. That was where the last. By the way, as you know, right after Washington stepped down, the entire thing degenerated right into terrible politics. Right, Jefferson and Madison were going at each other just like they do today.
But even and even so, I think those guys were at least principled, and but I see it in the common people. I mean, I see it. I'm constantly listening to radio, and somebody's going to call, and he's going to say, Rush said, or Glenn Beck. And obviously that's on the conservative side because there aren't too many liberals.
Or Rachel Maddow said. Rachel Maddow said.
Whatever. And they're just going to, they believe it. They believe it because they want to believe it. And, and I always say, well, how do you know that you really think they're even-sided? It's got to be right because
they wouldn't say it.
I don't know. Like I said, things I go back far enough, even to the '60s, where the idea of the government official, it's our president, whether we agree with them or not, and I just don't know But I just think that's civility in our.
Oh, and I had that with I had that with Tiger Woods. I don't know if you remember, but he a couple times refused invitations from President Clinton to the White House. And the thing about that was nobody knew whether that was politics or what it was, but it was seen as somewhat disrespectful. Because the President of the United States has asked you to come to the White House, and obviously it's not for a head of state dinner and it's not for important policy reasons, but it's still like the President of the United States has asked you. In my profession, if a judge asks you to take a case, that I've got this little old lady who needs a lawyer, or I've got this guy locked in a state prison somewhere who's completely mentally insane and has probably got a losing cause, but I still want to make sure it gets a fair vetting, I would like you to take this case. It's considered a very big sign of either disrespect or a complete lack of understanding of civility for somebody to simply tell a judge no like that. And it's not because of any other reason, but just respect that they've asked you, And of course, I now realize that the reason Tiger Woods didn't want to be in the same room with Bill Clinton is they'd be scrapping over the same girls. But that's something we learned later. Did I lose Jay? Yeah, Jay, did I lose you there for a minute?
Yeah, I guess you did.
I'm going to take another call, so I got to wrap up.
All right, cool.
All right, boss. Thanks for listening. Who have I got?
Oh, this is Ron.
Ron, you're on the air.
Hey, Ron. Mr. Rominger?
Yes. What's going on, my friend?
Property damage from the neighbor's trees. He's got a tree line between neighboring properties. They're old trees, tall trees, noted for breaking over with wind and such. They're starting to fall, drop limbs, causing property damage. And it's only a matter of time till one of them's going to fall in the house.
Right.
What's the recourse there?
Well, and the way I like to answer these questions sometimes is to back up and let's just talk about the situation in general and then work our way to your specific case, okay?
All right.
If anybody wants to jump in, by the way, it's 1-800-734-2132. Basically, if I plant a tree on my yard and its branches hang over on your land, you can trim those branches off, okay? We'll start with that proposition. You can't kill my tree, though. You're not supposed to negligently chop them off and kill my tree. So we usually tell people use an arborist or somebody that knows what they're doing, a tree trimmer. But if there's a windstorm and my tree just falls over and lands on your house, there's no liability for that because a naturally occurring condition of real estate, such as a growing tree that falls over and damages a neighbor's property, is not the responsibility of that landowner. But let's back up. If I have reason to believe that the tree is dangerous, so it's getting rotty, worm infested, and somebody tells me it looks like it's going to fall over, and it does, I may be negligent because I'm aware of it, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And so that creates a potential liability on the other landowner. The remedy for you, though, when that guy says, I don't really care or I'm not going to do anything to fix that, is to file a nuisance lawsuit. And you say, basically, Judge, this guy has a tree, and it's a threat to my house, and here's why. And the judge can order that the tree be taken down. Obviously, you sometimes get into competing discussions over that, if that makes sense. Because, you may say the tree looks like it's going to fall on your house, and another guy may say it doesn't, and then the judge might want to hear from people who know things about trees, like Bob Carey or somebody like that, who can say, hey, I know that this tree is dangerous and here's why. Or conversely, the other guy says, this tree appears fine and it doesn't seem any more likely to fall than any other tree in the world. And maybe just trim one branch and it should solve this guy's, most of this guy's fears. So it'd be a factual question, but you do have a remedy. Have you tried talking to the fella yet?
It's actually my mom's house, and I don't live there.
Okay.
So I haven't had a chance to go over and talk to him yet. I don't know how rational he'll be about it, but I do know that in past when branches have fallen over, there's one sticking out of her shed roof right now as we speak.
Uh-huh.
Every time I'd go over to clean up the mess out of the yard, cut the branches and whatnot, and some of them are pretty big, he's driven by and looked and just put his hand up and waved, so I'm assuming that, he's taking care of it. I don't need to bother with it.
Right. Yeah, you might want to have a discussion with him. Here's what I usually suggest this for landowners. If you get into a a wrestling match over it. You end up running up legal fees, and so sometimes I tell people, if you get up in a fight with the other guy and you come see me, we could end up spending $500, $1,000 trying to figure this out. Sometimes more.
My mom's on a fixed income.
Right.
She doesn't have the money to legally fight this.
Well, right, and that's why I say sometimes you go over to the neighbor and you say, "Listen, would you be willing, if we get a tree trimmer in here, split the cost with me?" In other words. And some people say, well, I don't want to pay for it. And I say, yeah, that's okay, but you might be able to force the other guy to remove them. But it's going to cost you more to force the other guy to remove them than it would for the two of you to pay somebody who knows what they're doing $250 or $350 to come in for an afternoon and cut down a lot of the dead wood, so to speak. Mm-hmm. So that's another option to put that in your quivers when you approach him, and he's, well, I don't want to, say, well, what if we got somebody to come in and we, your mom, my mom and you, or me, mom and you, or whatever, sometimes the kid has to pay, split this bill and get somebody an estimate on what we need to do. The guy may be aware that's a problem and figure he doesn't have to do anything because you're doing it, or quite frankly, he may just be oblivious, and just waves and says hello because it doesn't occur to him that this is a problem he needs to be thinking about.
Or maybe he knows that because it's an act of God, he won't be legally responsible if one does fall in the house. Potentially,
yeah. So that's the other thing you might sometimes want to do is get somebody out. If one of the trees is in danger of falling and you have an arborist come out and they make a report like that, you can basically serve it on your neighbor, and that puts them on notice of the problem, and therefore that you may be able to suck them in on liability later. Mm-hmm. So for instance, I was driving down the road. This is how my lawyer's mind works. I'm driving down the road yesterday, and I'm behind one of these new state police cars, and they're I think they're a Ford 500, and the back window on those cars, it's one of the cars when you were to look out the back window, you can't see right behind the car. I don't know if you're aware of this or not, but some cars, the way the designs of the hoods are and the back rear windows, you can see objects that are pretty close to the car behind you, so you don't run over the kid on the tricycle if he's at least 20 feet out. Mm-hmm. There's a couple cars, I think the Chrysler 3000 is one of the worst offenders. You can't see for more than 100 feet to the road, so if you're backing up, you have no idea what's behind you, except for your mirrors, of course. And I was looking at the state police car. I feel like I should write the state police a letter and tell them that they chose a car that has the worst view for backing up, and when they run somebody over and back over them, they should be on notice of this problem. And that once they have noticed, they have to think about it. So one of the famous ones is there's a branch obscuring a stop sign. The borough of Carlisle doesn't know about it. So a lawyer sends them a letter and says, hey, your stop sign on Pomfret Street is obscured by a branch. Now, when somebody misses the stop sign and has an accident, the township has liability because they're on notice. Same thing with the trees. If you've got a tree that's eminently going to fall, or at least your expert thinks is in a strong possibility of being in danger because it's dead and infested or whatever, then by serving that report on the other side, you kind of suck them in to potentially be liable later. Mm-hmm. Now, you'll really be collecting from his homeowner's insurance if he has it, you hope, right?
Well, that's another problem, too, because we come to find out that his homeowner's insurance company and my mom's are the same agent.
Right, so you get lots of help.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
I always joke about that. Whenever everybody's got the same companies, the fix is in, right?
Exactly. I explained to her that they're probably not going to want to pay a liability claim because it's coming out of their pocket. It's not like they're fighting some other homeowner's insurance company to get money from them to pay to fix your house. It'd be coming directly from them, you're paying your dues to.
In theory, as they do it, as they lay it out, as they would tell you it works, it shouldn't make a difference, okay? But I know, we all know that everybody knows who, I have Erie Insurance and he has Erie Insurance, or I have State Farm, he has State Farm. Once that happens, that there's a likelihood that there's going to be some, even if it's not conscious consideration, you're certainly not going to get everything to flow as smoothly as you would like. And you're right, because there's not another pocket to tap. So having a big protracted battle really doesn't help them. It just is sucking money from the left hand to the right hand.
Right.
So yeah, I agree with that 100%.
So there's no easy. The property, the tree belongs to you. It's on your property. It damaged the neighboring property's house. you're liable for. That's not how it works anymore.
Yeah, well, the answer is it's never really worked that way. If the branch falls off of like I said, naturally occurring condition. So the law's always been that a naturally occurring condition on my property damages your property. It's not my fault. But with trees, once they get rotty and damaged, and I should know. So, if you think about it, sometimes the insurance adjuster can come out, right? And he can look at the tree and go, okay, anybody in there with half a brain would have known this tree was dead and been dead for years. How much time I got? 20 seconds. I got to go, my friend. Thank you very much. Hey, stop in at Harrisburg Beer and Cigar over Union Deposit Road in Harrisburg. Tell them Carl sent you. 1-800-734-2132. Again, 1-800-734-2132 is the law office number. It's also the number here. I'll be back next Saturday. 1-800-734-2132. Carl Rominger signing out. God bless and thank you very much.
From the L.B. Smith Ford Lincoln Studios, this is Country Gold FM, WIOO Carlisle, and WEEO Shippensburg.
From ABC News, I'm Dave Packer. It's being called once in a decade cold, and still more coming. Frigid air from the North Pole being funneled over the U.S. as far south as the Gulf Coast by what forecasters call a polar vortex. The next round of sub-zero cold will hit the Midwest by tomorrow night, also coming up to a foot of snow. In New England, they're still digging out from the last snowstorm. ABC News correspondent Ron Claiborne wrote out the storm in Boston.
26 states are cleaning up after a massive winter storm that broke records in some areas. The weather is being blamed for at least 16 deaths, stretching from Minnesota to New York State. Hardest hit was Boxford, Massachusetts, north of Boston, which was walloped by close to 2 feet of snow.
The extreme cold over the last 24 hours has kept lots of airplanes on the ground this morning. The total delay since the snow started earlier this week, now at 50,000. One airplane that will be taking off, Air Force One. President Obama returning to Washington from his Hawaiian vacation tonight. First on his agenda, pushing Congress to restore benefits for the long-term unemployed. The leader of an al-Qaeda-linked group active across the Middle East has reportedly died while in custody in Lebanon.
Majid al-Majid was the purported leader of the Abdullah Azam Brigades, a militant group with al-Qaeda links designated a foreign terror organization by the U.S. According to reports, al-Majid was detained while traveling from Beirut to the Bekaa Valley that borders Syria. A senior Lebanese army officer says he died of kidney failure while in custody. Under al-Majid's leadership, the brigades grew from a relatively minor outfit to a significant terror group. The most recent attack claimed by the group was the double suicide bombing in November outside the Iranian embassy in Beirut that claimed 23 lives. Linda Albin, ABC News.
Libya says an American basketball player has been released from detention after he was arrested by military troops in Benghazi earlier this week. Still unclear why he and a Cameroon national were held in the first place. You're listening to ABC News.
Right now at the Home Depot, get whole home basic carpet installation for just $37, which means we'll have money left in our budget to upgrade to the good stuff, the soft stuff, the durable stuff. Soft spring carpet, perfectly plush, perfectly tough. Let's do this. Whole home carpet installation for just $37. More saving, more doing. That's the power of the Home Depot. Valid through January 29th with purchase of carpet and pad. Minimum purchase of $499. U.S. only. See store for details.
When a cold hits, you've got to hit back. And when your cold comes with both pain and sinus pressure, you've got to hit back even harder. Only Advil Cold and Sinus treats your worst cold symptoms by combining Advil, the #1 selling pain reliever, and a powerful nasal decongestant in a single pill. No other cold brand delivers stronger pain relief than the pain reliever found in Advil Cold and Sinus, the 1-2 punch at pain and sinus pressure. Find it at the pharmacy counter. Use as directed.
A California judge has ruled that the mother of a 13-year-old girl on life support may move her to another facility so long as the mother takes full responsibility for any consequences. Oakland's Children's Hospital declared the girl brain dead, but her mother says she feels the girl is improving.
If I felt that my child was suffering in any type of way, I would not keep her on that machine. I would not. I love her that much that I would let her go.
The family has arranged for an anonymous doctor to insert and a breathing tube to facilitate the transfer. A narrow vote by Boeing machinists to concede some pension and health benefits in order to keep building 777X planes in Washington state. The local union was against the vote, saying it gave away too much, but it was overruled by the national union. The flu seems to be in full season, with 20 states reporting this year's strain, H1N1. ABC News Chief Health and Medical Editor Dr. Richard Besser says be cautious with elevator buttons, door handles, and other surfaces in public.
You can get it from surfaces. And so many people have to work even if they're sick. They don't have that kind of sick leave. So you have to be careful in your work setting because that's where a lot of germs are being spread.
A Texas man's dog was found 800 miles away in Arizona, identified by its tags. The mystery, how the pooch got there, but 86-year-old owner thinks it was scared by New Year's Eve fireworks. Beatles called him an inspiration. Phil Everly of the Everly Brothers has died at 74. This is ABC News.
The joint supplements of today are sadly incomplete because they don't give you the joint relief you need. Until now. Introducing the complimentary 2-week sample of Instaflex, our most powerful joint formula ever. It's the #1 selling joint supplement at GNC. Claim your sample today. 1-800-451-6580. Great for your knees, hands, even your hips. Instaflex is available at GNC and Walgreens, but you can only get your complimentary sample by calling 1-800-451-6580. 1-800-451-6580.
Dave Packer, ABC News.
Have you lost your free checking? Well, Members First Federal Credit Union has the free checking account that you're looking for with no minimum balance, no monthly fees, and free overdraft.